Well, I think we are live, Jaclyn. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us again on another Image Review Live. I think the last one we did, Jaclyn, remember if you remember, I think it was beginning of February. Is that right?
Yeah, it was one of the first or second week of February.
And this one is at the end of March, so it's been quite a bit. But that's because been so busy traveling. And I was just thinking, and actually we should have discussed this before we started going live. But I was just thinking that April's going to be hard. April, I'm not sure we're
hmm
going to be able to do anything in April because I'm home in April for just 3 days. Um, I am heading on Sunday to Costa Rica to do run a couple of workshops down there. Then I'm going home. I'm home for 3 days, and then I head to Alaska to lead a couple of workshops there as well. So I'm not sure we can do this in those 3 days that I'm home. That's
I
too
don't think
tight.
so either. But I think that you'll have time. We'll be able to make some time sometime in May rather.
In
So
May, yeah.
looking
So
forward to that.
we'll probably have to skip April, and go straight into May, and it'll probably
hmm
be kind of second half of May because I can't remember when I come back in May, but it's going to be a little later in May. The good news is I'm
Absolutely.
home in June, so we should have plenty of time to do another image review live in June. So
Definitely. And maybe you'll also have participants from both your Costa Rica workshops and your Alaska workshops submitting their photos from their excursions as well for
well, that
that
would be cool.
image review live. Yeah,
That would be very, very cool.
yeah.
Excellent. So for this image review live, we actually have submissions from 10 people. And as for those of you that have joined us before, what happens is that sometimes we have a lot of images from a lot of people, which we do right now. We have 34 images submitted, and we can't possibly go through all those 34 images in 1 hour. So what we do is we go through one image per person, and then if we have time, we'll circle back around. I don't know that we've had time ever to circle back around to another series of images. But I still enjoy the fact that people send a few images because sometimes
hmm
it allows me to pick an image that I think we can talk about a little bit more than others. And
Right.
also people are submitting also before and after, which I think it's great as well.
hmm
So before we get started, anything else, Jaclyn, that we need to talk about that you can think of?
Yeah. Man, putting me on the spot. Let me
Yeah.
think. Well, we've got a lot of amazing opportunities coming up for Juan that people can still be part of. If anyone is interested in our North Carolina Waterfalls workshop coming up at the end of May, we still have some openings there. We also just have two spots that opened for our July Katmai Alaska workshop. So if
Hmm.
anyone is interested in seeing the sows and their little cubs playing around on the mud flats and playing around with each other and being able to observe that, there is an opportunity to still take part in that adventure as well. And we also recently just opened up, we have an additional opening, or two openings rather, for Antarctica coming up this
Yes.
October. And that's a really rare, really rare opportunity that's been sold out for a long time. So if anyone should be interested and had wanted to join us, now there is an opportunity for two additional spots. So hope that someone will take that because that's going to be an adventure of a lifetime.
Yeah, that trip has been kind of funny because we've kind of sold out, and we lost one spot. We sold out, and then we
Yeah.
just recently lost two spots. People had to back out. So we do have
hmm
two opportunities, and this is not just to Antarctica, but it's also to South Georgia, which is, to
hmm
me, kind of the prize. Is really what I'm
Hmm.
really excited about going down to the Antarctic because South Georgia has the
Yeah.
largest colony of emperor penguins. It's like 1 million penguins that we get to see, plus a lot of other stuff from leopard seals to sea
hmm
lions and all sorts of birds. So it'll be really exciting. It's a long trip, but it's a lot of fun and kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. And that's coming up this year in is that November, isn't it? See, my
Yeah,
schedule is so crazy. I have no idea. Unless I look at a calendar, I have no idea where I am.
I've got it. I've got it. Yes,
Yeah.
it's end of October, October 21st
Mm,
to November 11th, actually.
good.
So it's a long trip, but it is a really incredible experience and opportunity, like Juan said, to go witness this emperor penguin colony in South Georgia too is
Yep.
really remarkable. And if you're interested in seeing some of his photos from previous trips, you can find that on his website.
Pretty cool. So why don't we get started? Because we have a bunch of images to talk about, and what we're gonna do is, I can't remember if we started in alphabetical order last time or reverse alphabetical order, but I decided we're gonna go reverse alphabetical order this
Do
time. We have to figure out a way to start from the middle next time,
There you go.
so that we're not going one or the other. Because those people in the middle always kind of get in the middle. They don't get the big go first or whatnot. Anyway, so why don't we get started? Looking here, it's been a little while, so I got to figure out how to change our screen so that you guys can see what we're looking at. So this is our first submission, and this is from Steve Nimzik. And absolutely amazing, beautiful image, great capture. One of the coolest things about these creatures, the cormorants, if you can take a look here in the eye, is this beautiful aqua. Yeah, I guess that's the right color. I'm not sure how well you can see it. Jaclyn, you probably have a better name for the color, but it's this beautiful green, blue, brilliant
Hmm.
eye, which I always find fascinating with the cormorants. And what a couple of things that I like about this image is the action that's going on. We can see where this cormorant was just taking off, and there's a trailing splash on the left hand side. There's another smaller splash just below the bird as it's trying to take off. This image, and we've talked about this before on some of the um, uh, um, image reviews that we've done in the past, is that one of the cardinal rules, one of the things that we really like to follow, is providing more space in front of our subjects
Hmm.
as they're moving. In this case, we have a lot more space behind the subject than in front of the subject. So I'm kind of curious as to what people feel, about that, how they people feel about that. Um, I think in this particular image, it works because we do have that nice point of interest on the left-hand side, which is that big splash of water, which Steve was able to capture very nicely.
Hmm.
It still feels a little uneasy on the right-hand side because there's not a lot of room there. But I think, in my opinion, I think it still works. And one of the reasons why it works is because Steve also did one of the things that I really, really enjoy, and that is he made the image more, panoramic. It's wider than it is taller, which gives you a
Hmm.
lot of motion, a sense of motion in the scene. And the colors in the scene, the eye and that water, those two colors almost match, and we have all this great action taking place. So I think overall the image works really well, even though it's breaking one of those cardinal rules of wildlife photography, which is allowing a lot more space in front of your subjects than behind your subject. But that goes to show
Hmm.
that those rules, as we call them, rules of composition, are really meant to be guidelines,
Hmm.
not such hard rules that you have to absolutely follow. What do you think, Jacqueline?
Yeah. Yeah, I really, first thing I want to say is that when Juan had pulled up the images that we were reviewing, I didn't know everyone who had submitted, and I knew immediately that this was a Steve Nimzik photo. It's
That's funny.
just it Yeah, and I really want to applaud Steve for that, that he has a way of taking his photos that are very like identifiable to him and his what he is so strong at doing. I agree with you as well that the aspect ratio of this image, it looks like a panoramic, and I think that that also lends the idea that it feels very cinematic. I like the wide depth of field. I really do like that. I think that the waves and the texture behind it really add a lot to the action that's happening, and that stop motion of or the stop action of the kind of the takeoff, the liftoff, and having that splash of water is just really compelling as well. So I really appreciate Steve submitting this, and I think it's a great photo, great contrast, great color contrast, all of that. I think it's really on its way, and I don't mind that there is not as much room because I can tell that this is an action shot and that the bird will very soon be out of the frame. And I think that is also lending its strength to how cinematic it looks.
Something to really pay attention to this image is where the light is coming from. The light
Mm,
is absolutely perfect in this particular scene. You can tell that this light is coming from the right,
hmm.
but also behind. So it's kind of coming over my right shoulder as I'm looking at this subject. And the reason I can tell that is because the way the light is falling, not just on the face of our subject, but also on the wings. You can see how
Right.
this side of the wing is really nicely lit, whereas the back is in the shadow. If our sun was coming straight from behind us, we would be able to see a lot more light on the back of the wing as well as the back of the bird, and not so much on the front. You can see on these front shoulders, the leading edges of the wings are very lit. So the light is absolutely perfect in this shot. And actually, what I want to do
Right.
is I want to show you. Steve sent the before and the after. This is the
Mm,
original shot
wow.
as he took it. Um,
Hmm.
and you can see the original aspect ratio of the image, but also, the work that he did to bring out that detail in the scene.
Hmm.
Especially look at
Wow.
he added some warmth to the image, some warmth to the light, which,
Mm,
this light is actually pretty low. So I'm guessing that this was probably late in the afternoon or early in the morning,
hmm.
probably late in the afternoon. And you look at the original image here, the color is much more cold and neutral. See the light on the
Hmm.
on the shoulder here. See how it's kind of whitish. There's not or even bluish really compared to how
Wow.
warm the image is over here. So very
Hmm.
nice job, Steve, at bringing that light in there and accentuating it and warming it up a little bit. I think it made a big
Right.
difference.
And I think that warmth also really helps tie in the color of the beak with the warmth on its wing too. I think all of it just works really well. So that's a great edit, and that's a good example of why we like to see before and afters as well. If
Right.
that's really compelling.
Okay, so let's look at the next one. This one is from our friend Sally Arata. Um, and I think we can all guess where this is, right? It's Yellowstone. It's Yosemite. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
People confuse those so much. People tell me when they're trying to say Yellowstone, they say Yosemite all the time. So I had to take
You
that
and me both.
opportunity to say it the reverse, just to mess with people.
Exactly.
Um, this is absolutely beautiful light, absolutely
Wow.
gorgeous light with these beautiful clouds in here. And the waterfall as it's coming down with a little bit of snow dusting and some ice down at the bottom of the waterfall. I mean, I think it's gorgeous. I think that, I love how the light is so beautiful in this area and so bright lit and so
Hmm.
warm. But I don't care so much about how cold and wet it feels on the back part of this image. So I do wonder if, a crop would, with this, if this image would benefit from a crop to make it a little bit more interesting, focus our viewer's eye on, I think, the most important part of the image. So I'm going to try doing that, see what that looks like,
Hmm.
um, and see what you think.
Hmm.
You bring it up a little bit more on the. Got to figure out what I'm gonna crop on the left
Hmm.
hand side, maybe somewhere around there. Um, so let's see what that looks like. So that is,
Hmm.
the after crop compared to. Let's compare it over here. That's before, and that's after.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because, and I've said this many times before, I am not a big fan, I personally am not a big fan of, square aspect ratios, one-to-one aspect ratios, because oftentimes it feels that the image is much
Right.
more static. I prefer that panoramic, wide aspect ratio. But I think that in this image, for me, it works very, very well. And I personally like this crop better because it really focuses my attention on the best parts of the image, which is, the way where the light is falling on the rocks over here, the way the light is falling on the waterfall. these clouds that are really nicely lit. You still have that bit of that background of the cold, clammy,
Mhm.
wet day, what feels like a cold, clammy, wet day, but your eyes are really focused on what's important in the image. So for me,
Right.
I personally feel this image is stronger. It grabs my attention
Mhm.
a lot more if I were walking past it, in someone's house or even at an airport. This image would grab me versus the other one, may have grabbed me, but it would have had a lesser chance of grabbing me as this image because it's really bringing me into this amazing light on the waterfall. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, this is just a good example of how reviews and these critiques are, pretty subjective to just what each person's personal preference is. For me, I really thought that the original crop that she had was stunning. When I saw the submission, I loved that we had that kind of juxtaposition between that beautiful light hitting the waterfall and hitting that snow, and you can tell that there's weather that has moved through, that the clouds have broken, and that there's this gorgeous, illumination of this waterfall, but perhaps a storm is coming or a storm is moving away. Perhaps maybe at the very left part of the frame, maybe I would crop it in a bit to like that major peak right there on the left, that's kind of in front of the left side clouds.
It's
And
like
maybe I would
right
work
around
with it a
there.
bit. Right, exactly. Maybe I would kind of work with it there, but still keep that really shadowy kind of like it shows like the temperamental weather of landscape and wildlife photography. That comes with the territory, right? But I think it's just such a beautiful capture that I want to see the entire image. I really think that it's compelling to see those clouds coming in, that little bit of beautiful soft sunlight that's just like kissing the peaks, but then that like kind of ominous clouds that are just on the in the background. So I really like the framing that we have right now, but I do also think that your crop as well does really highlight the beauty of that light that's hitting the more foreground mountains too. So it's up to, each person what they would personally like to see. And for me, I think that both of the crops are really strong.
Yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right. And we've said that in the past too. Is the only person you really need to please is yourself. And
Mhm.
the crop. I don't think that any of these crops are bad crops or
Mhm.
bad presentations. I think a lot of it is
Mhm.
what you're trying to
Right.
convey
Exactly.
with
Mhm.
and how you're going to present this image, where you're going to present it. One can give you a better sense of place and scale
Right.
versus the other
Mhm.
one. I feel another crop that's tighter in may have more impact and more grabbing power,
Sure.
stopping power. So it really depends
Sure.
on what you're trying to convey, what the feeling you want to convey, and how you feel about the
Mhm.
image. But at the end of the day, a lot of these images, there's lots of images that I have that I love, that are some of my favorite images, that most people look at them and be like, nothing special, because those images have
Mhm.
a special connection to me. I have some
Right.
sort of emotional connection to the image, and I don't care what other people think of the image as long as I like it. That's all that matters to me, and I may print it, put it in my house or something like that, um,
Mhm.
because it does elicit that connection or that emotion in me. And this
Yes.
image is one of those images that I think would do that as well. Kind of,
Mhm.
brings back the memory of standing there and seeing this,
Mhm.
this light and this weather unfolding before your eyes. It's pretty special.
Definitely. It has a pretty palpable mood, so I do think that regardless of whatever the crop is, I think that it's a really strong image to kind of elicit that emotional response and to have that impact. So great, great photos, Sally. I'm glad that you had a really good time in Yosemite.
Okay, so another good friend of ours, Mary Hart, and this is a pair of great horned owlets. And I think I've seen this image before, or maybe this is a new one. She's
I think
actually
it's
been
new.
on a tear taking a lot of owl pictures down in Florida. So,
Hmm.
and this is the right time for these owls to be hatching. So who knows? Maybe she took this very recently.
I think it's
Um,
pretty recent. I saw her posting about this, that it was
yeah.
recent, and yeah,
Very,
yeah.
very
So
cool.
it looks great.
I love the juxtaposition of these two owlets, one in front of the other. You can see the one in the
Right.
background is just a little bit out of focus, which gives you that
Mm-hmm.
sense of depth and dimension in the scene, and just the kind of the pose of these two guys. They're curious,
It's
both
perfect.
looking in different directions. I think it works very nicely. And one of the coolest things about gray horned owls is that they have those bright yellow eyes. If you compare that with
Exactly.
like barred owls don't have those bright yellow eyes. There's a few owl species that have those bright yellow eyes, and the great horned owls certainly do. And you can tell these are great horned owls both because of the eyes, but also because you're starting to see those little tufts on these guys,
Mm-hmm.
on these little chicks. Now,
So
this is
cute.
another one where she sent us the before and after. So this is the original
Wow.
shot. It
Wow.
kind of a tough exposure, tough situation because you got these super bright specular highlights in the background, which is going to
Mm-hmm.
affect your exposure. I think that in a situation like this, I would still want to, do plus exposure compensation so that I didn't have so much shadows in here that I had to bring out, even if that meant blowing out some of this background. But the fact that she did this super tight crop on the owls themselves, I think, kind of gets rid of a lot of that specular highlights in the background. So I think it works really well. She does have detail everywhere in the image, which is one of the
Right.
advantages of not having blown out any of these is white and actually doing a little bit underexpose the image a little bit. I think you could have had a little bit more room, but that's really
Mm.
nitpicking from an exposure perspective.
Right.
Beautiful. I love these. I love these little guys. I'm gonna have to have Mary take me where she's getting these owls.
Yeah, I think it's a really amazing image. The expressions could not be better. I like how she framed it as well. Perhaps a little bit more room around the, especially, there's so many ways that you could do it, but I do think maybe a bit more breathing room. But I love that this just feels like such an intimate shot, like she's up close and personal, and to see that the before and after shot, like it's a great edit as well, and it does
Right.
not feel overdone whatsoever. So there's a bit more room to play around with the crop, but I think that the everything else that she's applied, I think it really highlights the beauty of the color of their eyes. These, like, they just look so cute. You wanna like cuddle them, but of course you don't want to do that in real life. But it's like she's
Oh
made them
yeah,
look
you
like
do
these
not want to do
cuddly.
that.
No, but
They
she
will
just makes
draw
them look
blood.
like
They will
these.
they will poke your eyes out.
Exactly, exactly. But you're like, oh, what cute little creatures to poke your eyes out. It's a really, really beautiful shot. I think it's a great moment to capture. I'm sure she has other beautiful shots as well that are from this shoot. So I'm eager to see more. But I do really, really like this edit. It just, yeah, it's really timeless. So great job, Mary.
Okay, so we have a Marie Stuckey. I think she may be a
Wow.
first time submission onto the image review. And look at these great blue herons. What a pose, what a background, what a
Wow.
location where they are. Very, very nicely done. And the amount of detail on these feathers is just unreal. It's just beautiful. And they have these
Mm-hmm.
breeding plumage going on. You can tell they're in breeding plumage because they have these veils. They develop these veils on their backgrounds,
Right.
and their colors are, so vivid. I think that again, I love the framing element that we have with these foreground,
Right.
foreground vegetation in the foreground and the background vegetation as well as the sky.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about this before, especially in landscape photography, but also in wildlife photography, layering. It's a very effective way to draw your viewer's eyes in. Um, And that layering also adds like a three dimensionality to the image as well. So it feels like you can almost reach in and touch these great blue herons, um, because they just seem to be popping out of the screen because of those layerings that you have, those layers that you have going on.
Absolutely.
I do have a couple of comments that I would make. Is to me, and it may be a difference in calibration between her monitor and my monitor, but the image seems a little bit too saturated. I would back up a little
Mm,
bit on the saturation in the scene. Those greens seem a little bit too electric. Um,
mm,
so I would try to back up of saturation a tiny, tiny bit. And also, one thing to always keep in mind, pay attention to, especially with great blue herons, but a lot of other species, is that you have this really white forehead on these
mm,
birds. And that's always challenging to keep that exposed, properly exposed, not blow out the details, not blow out the highlights there, while still having a good exposure overall. It does feel that in this image is a JPEG, so it's hard for me to tell whether it is whether there's detail there or not, because you can't really tell in a JPEG. But I would make sure, Marie, that you do protect those highlights, because right now, right here, at least in this JPEG, it just looks like pure white. There doesn't seem to be any
mm.
detail. And our eyes tend to gravitate towards the brightest part of the scene, which is this little bit right here. So this is an area that I would want to tame a little bit. Tame that brightness and try to bring a little bit of detail in there so I can see the feathers. We have so much detail everywhere else that
Right.
this part just like, it's completely detailless, and I want to be able to see that detail. But other than that,
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely incredible, the interaction between these two, the way that you were able to frame it with these framing elements and the background, everything about it is beautiful. And I think, again, this is a before and after. So let's look at the before shot
Wow.
and then the after shot.
Hmm.
Again, I think she did really well with cropping to try to get rid of some of these distracting elements over here. You have these great egrets in the background, which could be distracting. So having that nicer, tighter crop on the part of the image that's more interesting, I think works really nicely. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a beautiful shot. Firstly, Marie, thank you so much for submitting to our image review live for the first time. We really are happy that you've submitted. I think that this is a beautiful crop. I think it's a beautiful edit. For me, what I can see on my screen, I don't see like a loss of detail in the whites, but seeing that before shot, the raw file, or the unedited file, it seems like she has room to play with the the
Could
highlights and
very
the
well be.
detail in those whites. Yeah, if we can zoom
Yeah,
in, because I
that
can't
is a
see
CR. That is a raw file, so we should
raw
be able
file.
to. Yeah.
Right. So she
Um,
should have, ample kind of ample room then to revisit her edit and try
yeah.
to maybe scale back on the whites and the highlights, and but keeping all of the rest of this beautiful edit. I love the pose in this. I think it's so beautiful, and I think it was really strong of her to kind of frame this as well as like a portrait. It's just gorgeous. I don't feel like any of the background with the foliage is competing at all with my eye either. You can see that the wing in that back in the back wing is kind of overlapping with the wing in the tree, but to me it doesn't detract in any way. It just feels really like a compelling image because of that framing and because of the action that's going on in the foreground. I also, I don't see, at least for my screen, but I'm also on a laptop. Um, the greens look beautiful. But I think, yeah, just having a raw file, there's plenty of room to play with a bit more of the edits and making this a really, really strong image. So it's awesome to see. Thank you, Marie.
Yeah, looking at the raw, she did not burn this out, so you should be able to bring a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of detail into that space. So that's something I
Right.
would definitely, definitely do.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Really great shot of these herons. It's really cool.
Okay, so this is
So,
from Margaret West, and this looks like Namibia to me.
hmm
The famous dead trees. And a kind of different look to this particular image. I love what she did here with that sunburst as the sun is coming right over the dunes. But
Right.
one of the things I really like is the symmetry between these two trees. Um, oftentimes I've seen many shots from this location, and actually I think this is one of my favorites that I've seen there because of that symmetry between the two trees. They actually
Mm.
seem like two dancers almost, if you will. And I think that the juxtaposition of the trees together with the sand dunes um, works very nicely, and you have these very soft um, textures and lines on the sand dunes that I think we're gonna add to that mystique and add to that feeling of these two trees as dancers in the scene. I think that you also included what seems to me the right amount of foreground. A lot of folks will try to include, because the foreground can be very interesting here in the salt pan, being able to see a lot of this white foreground. But I think that, for me, the focus is the trees. So I want to have those, there's always that interplay between, your supporting element and your primary actors in the scene. To me, the trees are my primary actors. So everything else needs to take a back seat to them. They should be supporting my subjects, not detracting from my subjects. So you don't necessarily want those other elements to be taking up too much of the scene. And I think that you struck a pretty nice balance here between the foreground and the background and the layers and the trees.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, especially with photos from Namibia, sometimes people have a tendency to oversaturate their images, and to me, this feels perfect. I love the color of both the sand that, that sunburst is coming
Hmm.
over top, but also whatever that is to the right of the frame, the right of that sun star. Um,
I think
looks
that's
like
just
an
under the dune back there.
Another dune. Looks
Yep.
almost like a sandstorm coming her way. And I do really appreciate the framing as well. I love the texture that you've included in the foreground with the, as you said, the salt pan. That's amazing. The two trees are really compelling and beautiful. And I appreciate the placement too of that sun star. That sunburst is gorgeous, and it's somewhat middle of the frame, which most of your action is. And it really works in this image. I think it's just a photo that really breathes nicely. It has a lot of texture and shape and even some repetition. And yeah, it's just a really compelling image. So I think this is great. And yeah, I have no other comments
Yeah,
for
I mean, I think that what really makes this image work for me is the symmetry between the two trees. I think that if there were
the
two
symmetry is
distinct
great.
trees, very different trees, the image wouldn't be as strong
Hmm.
for me. I think the fact that there's so much in common between these two trees,
Right.
really adds to the scene. It's funny.
Absolutely.
These images that we're looking at have just been, very good. I mean, they're making our jobs really easy. We haven't really had
Right.
to to comment a lot on them and or make
I'm like,
some changes.
I'm ready to buy the print. I want to hang that print
Right.
up on my wall. It's like Namibia is my dream location too for a photo trip. So awesome job.
Okay, so we have an image here by Jim,
Well,
and it's a cardinal that looks like a little feeding station for being fed mealworms. Um, Kind of a neat scene. I think that our bird is, I love that vine that's going across. I think that the vine is adds a lot to the scene.
mm,
The challenge is, or I wouldn't say the challenge. One of the things that bird photographers are always looking for is matching the perch size to the bird. So that's something to always think about. This is a beautiful perch, but you look at that branch, that main part of that vine is really, really thick. It's almost as thick as the bird is. So for birds like this, you want to, a lot of folks were looking for branches that are going to be thinner, that really highlight more the bird and don't pull away from the bird and compete in attention, if you will, for the bird.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so always be thinking about that. Matching the branch that you're using to the subject that you're photographing. And I say that because
Mhm.
this is clearly a feeding station. You can see all these mealworms kind of in a little depression here on the backside of the vine, and there's a mealworm hanging out down here, and this cardinal's coming in to grab those mealworms. So if you're going to be creating a setup like this, try to match that perch with your subject. Think about that. How do you match those together? The other thing I would suggest is that in this particular image, we have quite a bit of space, and our subject is pretty small in the frame. So I again want to highlight my subject, highlight the most important part of the frame, and zoom in on it and make it that
Mm.
much more interesting and that much more in your face, if you will. Try to highlight it. Again, before we had this huge amount of branch, with our small bird in the middle. The branch was kind of overpowering, not just in the size, but in the amount of branch that there was in the frame. So being able to
Mm.
crop in a little bit reduces some of that branch. And this is kind of also challenging. Where do you place your subject? We always we talked about, just like we did earlier, putting your subject to have more room in front of it. Well, this bird's kind of
Mhm.
leaning to the left or pointing to the left, but is looking to the right. So you got to
Mhm.
figure out which way you're going to put him in the frame. Whether you're going to put him more on the right side of the frame or left side of the frame. To me, because it's pointing to the left, I want to have more room to the left, even though it
Mm.
is looking to the right. The direction of the action is to the left, so that's where I want to have a little bit more room.
Yeah. I really appreciate what's so striking about this upon first looking at it is the color contrast too. That really
Yes.
nice creamy background, that green creamy background, and then this very, very bright cardinal, bright red. And then just having the action of the mealworm hanging out of the side of its mouth too is just really, that's such a good capture. That's really timeless and almost kind of silly fun. It's awesome. The vine as well, I think, is really compelling, and it's not detracting. It's not, a distraction. I like your crop a lot. I also really appreciated like how there was more space and there was a bit less of a crop from the original image. Um, I might find, personally, if it was my photo, maybe like a happy medium. So I have a bit more of the green and a bit more space, and maybe the bird is less centered as it is a bit more on the right of frame. So, yeah, yep, exactly. And yeah, just playing around with that as well. I think that there's a lot of room to play with this image and there's a lot of compelling aspects to it. So, all in all, awesome shot. And there's so much potential. And I just really, yeah, really like it. Is there a before and after by chance, or it's just this?
I think it's just this one. Yeah,
Cool, cool.
just before and
Yeah,
after. So,
it's
Jim, the
awesome.
other the other comment that I would make is, maybe worthwhile to, pull out the of Photoshop and clone these mealworms that are over here. Clone them out so that it doesn't seem so much as a setup. It seems a little bit more natural. I think that having these guys hanging out here really sort of screams of, okay, this is a perch and a setup. So absolutely, definitely try to go in and to remove those, and that shouldn't be all that difficult to do in Photoshop. In Lightroom might be a little bit more difficult, but something like Photoshop should be able to remove those pretty easily.
Definitely. And I had just asked Jim if you're in the comments right now too in the chat. Let me know where you captured this cardinal as well. I'm interested to know where you're photographing the cardinal. Really great.
Cool.
You said South
Um,
Carolina.
South Carolina. Very cool.
South Carolina. There you go.
So this image is from Ira, and this, I love salamanders, and this is a I want to. I'm not, there's so many species of salamanders that I couldn't tell you what it is. It may be one of these sticky salamanders. Um, and I love the color of these salamanders, especially when you have them as contrast with that beautiful moss in the background. And this is another one where it's a before and an after. Here's the
Wow.
before, and here's the after. Now, a
Wow.
couple of comments here. I love the shape of the salamander, the fact that you have this curve going on. However, what I would have tried to do is get way, way low, get down at eye level. That's going to
Mm,
do a couple of things for you. We're going to have a better connection with our subject, and it would have also given you a better sort of sense of depth as that salamander kind of curves away from you. Um, Now, the challenge with this is that you do have these little fruiting bodies of the moss that may get in the way when you're getting that low. So you'd have to work around those, either pluck those out or work around those as you're trying to
right.
photograph salamander. And one of the salamanders are really difficult to photograph, not because they necessarily move all that fast. Sometimes they do, some don't. Um, but one of the challenges is that they're so reflective because they're always wet. They always have a lot of moisture on them, so they tend to be very reflective. And that can
Mm,
be a challenge because you do have all these highlights there. In this case, you didn't have that much of that, which is great. You had nice soft light, which is one of the best ways to photograph, um, the salamanders. So so you did a good job, but I would definitely encourage you to get down low and get more eye
mm,
level. When we are at eye level with our subjects, we find it that much more compelling. When we're looking down at our subjects, we're kind of minimizing them. By
mm.
bringing them down to our eye level, it kind of puts them on equal footing to us and makes them grander that they may be, especially for such a small critter as one of these
Mhm.
salamanders. Um,
Yeah.
Absolutely awesome. If I had to take a guess, Jacqueline, and I don't know um, if Ira is here,
Ira
but
is, yes,
Ira
or
is, yeah.
was. Yes.
I would venture guess this was probably in the Smokies. And
Hmm.
you know why I say that?
Why?
Because the Smokies has more species of salamanders than anywhere else in the world. So I'm just playing the odds that this was taken in the Smokies.
Let us know, Ira. Is he right
Yeah.
or is he wrong?
Yeah, yeah. I used to
Um,
love going to the Smokies and photograph salamanders. Whenever I
right.
walked to the Smokies, I was lifting logs, lifting rocks, just to find all kinds of different salamanders. And actually, to take it a step further, just to show you how much of a geek I am, in Syracuse. Oh
Syracuse.
man, I was totally off. I was totally off. I do
All
have
right, Juan,
here.
get off the
Yeah,
train, Juan.
I played the odds like I said, and I lost. But just to show you how much of a geek I am with salamanders, I do have a salamander crossing next to my house. And for those of you that don't know, salamander crossings are basically salamanders in the spring, kind of in the first warm rain in the spring at night, is there when they're crossing from the woods over to a pond or a stream or some sort of body of water, because that's where they lay the eggs. So and they wait for that first rain, spring rain, warm spring rain to actually make that crossing. And one of the sad things about that is that, as cars drive by that road, tons of them get squished. So you will find me
Mm.
out there getting wet with a raincoat, saving salamanders and helping them across the road. So,
I would not expect anything less. I really love this image. I see what you're saying, Juan, about, getting low. That's often a really compelling a thing to approach a wildlife image like this, and to kind of elevate them rather than, as you said, minimizing by shooting from above, but capturing that curvature of the
Hmm.
salamander as well, I do think is really strong. So if there was like a happy medium where you could get a bit lower to see the
Absolutely,
salamander's
yes.
eyes a bit, I think that, and Ira is saying too that he's constantly finding them among wet leaves in his backyard. So there's seems plenty of opportunity for him to keep attempting these images like this. Um, One thing that I do have a note of, that what I would like to see is, there's beautiful light kind of along the salamander's backside and really illuminating the backside.
Yeah.
And I would love to see some dodging, maybe around right where your cursor is, one around its
Like this
left
back on
eye
the
that's
tail. Oh,
facing.
this. Yeah.
Right. So it's really well illuminated in the back, but right by its face and its kind of left side of its face going towards its arm, I would love to see maybe a bit more of some dodging to try to bring out just a little bit more light as well. I think that that would be a nice, simple edit. But for me, I think that this is a great shot, and I do like that I see the full curvature. You've got a really nice shallow depth of field as well, that you have the head fully in focus, and you've got its tail really nice and soft. So to me, it just looks very creatively done, very artful. And it seems like you've got plenty of opportunities too to keep chipping away at it and getting some really cool shots of these salamanders. Plus the color contrast as well of the orange in the salamander with that really really like verdant green too is super super eye catching. So I appreciate that he made that decision.
So, as you want to step it up a notch, one of the things I would definitely pay attention to is going to be that position of the extremities of this leg. You see how this leg is kind of trailing as opposed to leading. If you keep
Mm-hmm.
capture with that foot, that those beautiful paws, if you want. I'm not sure if they can be called paws on a salamander. I don't know what they're called, but that foot, those
Little
digits,
feet.
kind of the little feet kind of spread
Mm-hmm.
out in front of it as it's kind of like moving, giving you a little bit of sense of motion, would
Right.
definitely bring up the image a little bit, make it a little
Right.
bit better. Being able to see some detail on those digits would be kind of nice as well.
Definitely. And then it also really helps add to the idea that this salamander is in motion. You've got
Right.
it kind of curving and moving. And so you're absolutely right. That would be a really compelling addition as well. So awesome, Ira. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so now we have David.
Wow.
David Stern, and he's, we've seen a bunch of images from him in the past. I think he's the one that did a lot of the pinhole pictures, if you remember.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
and, he did submit one pinhole picture, but I put this one up front just because
Mm.
it's so neat and it's kind of this kaleidoscopic effect,
Right.
if you will, this sort um, of a mirroring. And I think I see two types of mirroring going on here. There's a horizontal, the immediate one that you see is the vertical mirroring, right? But I think there's
Right.
also a horizontal mirroring as
Hmm.
well. So basically, mirroring going across this way and a mirroring going across this way.
Hmm.
So really, this image is composed of just one quarter that's being replicated and flipped on the other sides, which can make some pretty interesting and um, compelling images. And this looks to me like a cactus, a detail on some cactus, which
Right.
kind of when you see something like this, it takes a minute to kind of peer into it and actually see it. But it also kind of makes me think about all these kind of interesting lines that are down here. So I think there's more to it than just that reflection going on. I think there's some um, graphic design implemented in here
Mm-hmm.
as well. That's adding that little bit of repetition and color that you're seeing down here, more
Mm-hmm.
so than at the bottom than at the top. So it's kind of an interesting image. It's definitely not something that I would do because that's not my thing, but I can appreciate the creativity and the vision behind
Right.
it. Um, Especially using something as interesting and with so much texture as the thorns on a cactus. Kind of zooming in on that cactus and photographing those thorns. Pretty cool,
Yeah,
pretty interesting, and kind of it makes
really
me,
cool.
I keep looking at a lot of different parts of the image and kind of focusing on detail in different areas.
Right. Yeah, this is definitely, so I was born and raised in the desert. This is definitely this, I feel like a piece of my heart is in this image. I love cacti. I love really cool abstract creative approaches to plant photography and such. And so I think this is awesome. And I really like all of I'm sorry, was it David? David who
Yes, David
submitted?
Stern. Yep.
David Stern. Oh, and David Stern is on here, I think. Um, yeah, I think that David really approaches his work very creatively, and his use of color is really interesting in all of the images that he's submitted. Um, this, like, to me, almost looks like a monster as well, or like if you were like taking a macro photography shot of like an insect and you were really, really close up, something like that if I was seeing it from far away for a moment at a moment's glance. So it's very thought provoking. I just really I love the contrast in this. It's almost kind of ominous with like the when you recede into the shadows of the like in between all of the spikes. It looks kind of like scary and ominous as well, but it's so compelling you can't help but just keep looking at it. So I think whatever your process is with editing, David, I think this is amazing, and I would really love to see more. Yeah, great job. I would definitely hang this on my wall.
Very cool. We are almost out of time. We have two more images that we want to go through,
Okay.
and this is from our friend David Sherwood. It kind
Hi,
of really
David.
neat and interesting shot. I mean, look at this wave. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this looks like a completely raw, file without any
Right.
editing or anything like that. Or maybe not. This is oops. Now it just loaded the all
There
the
we go.
edits. Yeah.
Great
Um,
edit, David.
yeah, that's
Great
pretty
before and
interesting.
after.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, that was a before and after because I had not seen.
Right.
Oops, what was that? Hold on a second. Look at that again. I wanted to do the
Yeah.
before and after. No, why is it the before and after not showing?
I don't know.
I don't know. So I would, looking at this image, he's done some pretty nice edits. I think that trying to look at the settings here, ISO 640. There seems to be a lot of grain going on in here for
Hmm.
an image at 640. Maybe he added some grain. I mean, like, we can't see exactly the edits that he did, but I
Hmm.
want to. One of the things I want to change, is this crop because
Hmm.
see how he's got this, the coolest part of the image is dead center, right?
Hmm.
Which is kind of cool because it brings it, kind of dead, it brings it into our attention, kind of slaps us in the face, so to speak.
Right.
But because it's dead center, it also, I think, has lost some of its momentum. It's lost some of its movement. So I
Hmm.
would want to see, a little bit more off center so that you get a little bit more sense of movement. I don't know if you can feel it now compared to before. You do get
Yeah.
a little bit more, from there to there. It just
Right.
seems like feels like there's a little bit more movement. You almost feel like the bottom of this wave kind of cresting as it's coming up to feed into this wave. And I think this is two waves crashing against each other. That's why you're getting this really big peak going up and splashing to the right. And I like the
Yeah.
fact that the way the light angle came in is really
Yeah.
highlighting, all of that white part of the crest of the wave and make it really stand out up against the background.
Right. Yeah, I really, really love this image. I love that there's this whitewash coming on the right-hand side of the frame, and then kind of mirrored to that is this mountain of a wave, and then a mountain on the left side of the frame. So to me, my eyes are kind of going in like a clockwise motion, and that with your edited crop, Juan, I think that that really helps as well, that your eye can move in a much more seamless way. Um, I whatever the grain is, I love it. I think that's beautiful, and to me, it looks like a film photo actually, with that
Mm-hmm.
whatever the texture is and those clouds behind it is awesome. Yeah, I love this image. I love the contrast that he pulled out of the image, and the he deepened the blacks and the shadows, especially on that left mountain. That is gorgeous. You're not losing any detail in the spray or in the whitewash. You might even be able, and Juan, let me know how you feel about this. You might be able to dodge a little bit from that spray going over as well and highlight just even a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
so that it is pretty similar to the whitewash where the sunlight is catching it on the bottom right part of the frame, to just really have like very distinct whites in the image. But I think this is so beautiful. I think this is an awesome capture. Yeah, I love to see how David has really improved and like has started to approach different creative styles as well. And we've been really fortunate to have David on a few of our workshops too. And it's so awesome to see the trajectory of his photography. So this is awesome, David. I'd love to know if you're here on the chat. Let me know where this was too. I don't know, Juan, if it says anything on the file, but really beautiful colors, beautiful contrast, and just an awesome like
Yeah, it
action
doesn't
shot
say.
as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, it's really cool, and that now that you mentioned, it does have this nostalgic feel to it, right? It feels like,
doesn't it?
like Hawaii 5 type of type that
Exactly.
type image with that kind of ectochrome look to it as well. So
Yes,
yeah, now that you mentioned that, I like that. I like the fact that he,
I do
does have that
too.
feeling to it.
I do too. That the blues, especially, like you're so right, like the ectochrome, or like for me, like portrait, I know had like really beautiful like blues and greens, and that just looks like a great film shot of Hawaii 5 for sure. That's
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah,
I mean that's the first thing that comes to mind to me is a
right.
Hawaii 5 70s
It's
TV
awesome.
show, with that color look, that palette to it. So
Right.
pretty cool.
Exactly.
But I
Yeah,
mean,
grain is
just this
good.
just this capture of these two like waves coming together and creating this
Hmm.
really interesting and looking water sculpture.
So I don't know how to pronounce this, and I don't want to botch it, but it is Hawaii. Juan, David
Okay,
just
I just saw
contributed.
that.
Yeah.
Key Beach,
Awesome, David.
Hawaii. Probably Key. Because I know that
Amazing.
Hawaiian is actually pronounced the way it reads. So,
Okay, cool.
okay, so
Very,
last
very
image
good.
here, we're going to look at images from David Reck. And
Mm.
David's also another good friend of ours, been with us on a number of trips, and enjoy talking to David from time to time. He's not afraid to pick up the phone and give me a call, which I enjoy. Lots of fun. Um, and this looks like a snowy egret, if I'm not mistaken. Kind of interesting coloration on the legs. So snow egrets have yellow feet and black legs. This one has a little bit of black on the legs itself. But it's interesting. I like the. I wonder, was this this is an edit. This is a JPEG, and I can't remember. Okay, so here's the before and the after. That's the after, and that's the before. Um, I mean, I love this sort of ethereal looking to this image. I love the, the soft contrast that you have between the foreground and the background, and how that background kind of like, it's almost like a seamless. It disappears into the background.
Right.
There's no like hard edge anywhere in there. But the square again. And you guys have heard. You're sick of hearing me say this. The square framing, there's so much action going on here that the square framing is, in my eyes, and feels to me that like it's fighting against the action that's going on in here. So I would like to see it a little bit longer on the horizontal plane, a little bit more space on the right, to give me a little bit more space for our subject to fly into or to interact with. Um, yeah, again, that's sort of my biases is trying to find the action. I love images that have a sense of motion to them, and
Right.
they're having that little bit of room, that giving you that little bit more panoramic view to it, just gives that much more room for our subject to move into. But I do love the soft absolutely soft light,
Mm-hmm.
the translucency of these feathers, these primary
Right.
feathers, is just really, really cool, really interesting. And then this little flip on the back wing, on the back feathers, also adds on to it. But yeah, I would like to see a little bit more space on the right. Now, Jaclyn, what do you think of, all this stuff in the down here? There's like all this little mud or whatever that's coming off of the feet, and there's some
Mm-hmm.
like
In
mud
the water.
things down here. Is that something you would crop out, or do you like leave there, or what do you think?
So I appreciate what you had said about, it looks like very like seamless and there are times that I see images that have this similar approach of almost like a monochromatic like tone to it.
Hmm.
And I think that sometimes it looks like to me when images have that that it almost looks unrealistic. Like it looks like someone has, taken a bird and put it onto a different frame and really edited it so it does not look realistic. It looks very dreamy, which is sometimes the intention behind the photographer. I almost feel like this gives me context of like it's either landing or it's taking off. I feel like it's landing. Would you agree?
I
The
want to say it's
bird
taking off because of
taking off.
the mud that's coming off of the legs. If it was landing, you wouldn't necessarily have that, but I don't know.
Right. Yeah, and David just commented. He
Oh,
said
I
there's a
see
lot of
that.
mud
Yeah.
stuff that was cleaned up, but I decided to leave some for a sense of place and motion. Maybe leave it all or get rid of it all. I would agree with David. I think that this gives me at least an understanding that this bird is not hovering in midair in fog, way off the ground, or that this bird has been taken from a scene and placed onto a canvas that is unrealistic and has previously been edited. I do like that I can see, okay, this bird, it's giving me context that the bird is very, very like just hovering above the water and very close to either landing or just taking off. So I agree with David that it does give a sense of context. It gives a sense of, motion. I can't see it as well that what's like just in front of its toe, like right where your sensor is. There's a
Right
little
here.
dot right there. Maybe I would clear that up and then just have that kind of texture right below so you can tell that that's the surface of the water. And I don't know, David, if perhaps you have also the image where maybe there's ripples in the water as well. If you framed it just a little bit wider and brought the framing
Yeah,
down a bit. Oh,
you
yeah,
can
see
see
that?
all of the mud on this one.
Yep.
That's
That's a
flying
good
around.
cleanup.
Yeah.
He
Oh.
definitely cleaned that up very well.
Yeah, and the
So
reason I
I
was
personally
asking
like
you
it.
how you felt about all that stuff in there, because I think it added to the scene. It's something that
I
I
do
think
too.
initially some people would want to remove. Oh, there's all this mud going there, but it adds to
Right.
that sense of motion and to that action.
Exactly.
So I would probably I personally, I think, David, I would have left a little bit more than you took out,
Hmm.
especially maybe on the back. Maybe
Hmm.
not so much on the front, but maybe on the back, because that will give you more sense of motion that it's moving towards the right. Um,
Right.
because right here you have this over here, but he removed the ones that, these guys coming up. So maybe I would leave some of those there just to give you a little bit more sense of motion. I think it would actually impart a little bit sense of motion. And I think
Yeah.
that because the image is so monochromatic,
Hmm.
even though it may be mud and dirt, the image is monochromatic. So, it could
Right.
be not necessarily dirt. It could be something else. So I don't think it's
Yeah.
objectionable from that perspective. It doesn't seem like it's dirt or mud or
Right.
whatever. It just seems part of the environment and kind of, organically part of that environment. So I think
Absolutely.
I would leave a little bit more just to give you that sense of motion in the scene. But other
Hmm.
than that, David, I really, I mean, I enjoy it. I like the image a lot. I love the ethereal quality of it. I
Me
love,
too.
you know, um, the transparency of these primary feathers, this flip on the back feather, the position of the
Right.
legs. Really, really, nice capture on this snowy egret. Really beautiful. Beautifully
Absolutely.
done.
I do agree with you, Juan. I think now having seen the like the unedited, uncropped version, having a little bit more of that kind of like spray
Mm-hmm.
behind the bird and behind its feet, I think would give. I was questioning, oh, is it taking off or is it landing? I think that would give a bit more context as well. But I personally, I like the aspect ratio of it. I think it looks beautiful. Almost to me looks like a beautiful stamp. Like I would like put,
Mm.
I would have this
Yeah.
as like a stamp. It's like so gorgeous.
Yeah.
And having a little bit of that action too with from takeoff with, I wouldn't immediately as a viewer think that that's mud. I would think that that was maybe just like water spray too.
Right. Right.
So I would agree with you, Juan. Having a little bit more of that action would give greater context, and the texture is really nice as well because, as you said, everything else is so ethereal and so dreamy, but it's not dreamy and ethereal being like pushing over into unrealistic, which I have seen people push their edits to be way more way less realistic than really I think they were
Right.
intending to. So awesome edit, David. I always really appreciate your submissions, and this is really incredible.
Well, cool. Well, thanks, folks. I
Yay.
mean, that's the last image that we're going to review because we've crossed past the hour. Like I said, we're almost never able to circle back around and do any others. But yeah, I like that because it allows us to give you guys, at least a decent amount of critique or ideas or suggestions to your images and feedback. But you guys are making our life easier every time because you're sending up images that have very few suggestions for us to add to it. So, either that's a testament to, how good you guys are, or maybe we need to get a little bit more challenging images from you guys that
Right.
you're kind of wondering, is this image any, worth it? Is it any good? What would you do to salvage this image? This image salvageable.
Hmm.
So think about that for future submissions. Not necessarily bring images that you are really happy with, that you want to highlight and showcase, but images that may challenge me, may challenge us, and you kind of stumped as to whether this could be a great image or not. Does it need a little bit of post processing, or is it not
Right.
good enough to really do that? So
Yeah, make Juan work a little more.
right, exactly.
Thank you guys so much. Your submissions are always so incredible, and I appreciate everyone who continues to submit and those who have chosen to submit for the first time this month. As Juan and I had said, we hope that once he's back from Costa Rica and Alaska, and some of you know Juan also just returned from Botswana, what, less than a week ago?
4 days ago.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Juan's a world traveler right now, but we will get to this the next image review live as soon as we can. And yeah, just really appreciate everyone for their continued support. We really enjoy
Yeah.
doing this.
Thank you guys for joining us. It's always a treat, and it's cool to see people's images, and hoping that you guys are finding these useful. And until next time, keep an eye out. We'll make announcements. But like we said, April's going to be a little tough, but we'll certainly be back in May.
We'll see
Okay,
you in
take care,
May.
folks.
Thank you, everyone.